The Slide Layers panel is in the lower right corner. I know we've not discussed what layers are and how to employ them yet, but for now, think of a layer as a slide within a slide. This is an oversimplified explanation, but for this video's user interface panel discussion, it will work. At the bottom of the panel, you will see three icons: Create New Layer, Duplicate Selected Layer, and Delete Layer. Then at the bottom right corner, you will see the Settings gear. The Dim checkbox's default setting is checked. This means that when you are working on one of the layers, all of the other layers, including the base layer, are dimmed or slightly grayed, so you can focus on the layer you are working on. It is recommended to leave this box checked. You are able to select the title of the slide layer to switch between layers. If you right-click the layer or double-click the layer, you will be able to rename the layer into something meaningful. Again, like the names on the timeline, it is important to distinguish between items to make it easier to program or debug your lesson. Let's first look at the Slide Properties window. You will access this window by first ensuring the base layer is selected, then by selecting the Slide Properties icon. This window programs how the slide appears, and the learner will interact with the slide. If your slide isn't advancing or showing something, remember to check the options on this window. The first drop-down menu gives you two options on how and when the slide will advance to the next slide. Your options will be automatically or by user. If you select automatically, the slide will advance to the next slide at the end of the timeline. If you select by user, the course will stop until the learner completes a programmed action that will direct the lesson to the next slide. When we say next slide, that may not mean the next slide numerically. The next slide could be in a completely different scene, or it just jumps ahead 3 or 4 slides. The When Revisiting drop-down menu is the one menu most developers have the most trouble with, and it will be the one setting that will cause your lesson not to appear as you intended. The default option will be Automatically Decide. This means that when a learner returns to this slide, the lesson will identify what has and hasn't occurred on the slide and where the slide is on its timeline, then decide what that learner will see and hear. Normally, this is fine, but it could prevent someone from advancing to the next slide, or it could require the learner to perform all the necessary actions a second or third time before continuing to new content. The Resume Saved State says whatever the conditions were when the learner initially left the slide and continued to the next slide, he or she will have those exact conditions when returning to the slide. Finally, Reset to Initial State means that every time the learner returns to this slide, it will act as it is the first time the learner has viewed the slide. The slide navigation buttons and actions are next. These refer to the buttons and actions the learner will see and do to advance within the lesson. If the button boxes are checked, the player will include a previous and next button in the player. If the swipe actions are checked, then the learner can swipe left or right on a mobile device to navigate through the lesson. The last drop-down are the player features for that specific slide. When setting up your lesson, you will set up what the player looks like. The player is the learner's user interface with the lesson. It is how he or she will navigate through the course and what information is presented to the learner. This menu will give you the ability to adjust the specific characteristics the learner will see. When you select Player Defaults, the player's settings will be applied to this slide. But when you select Custom for the selected slides, you will see more options to either add or remove from the player for that slide or slides. Where the gear icon opened the slide properties, when we have selected the base layer, it will open the Slide Layer Properties window when we have selected one of the layers. The top section of this window has 3 checkboxes: Hide Other Slide Layers, Hide Objects on the Base Layer, and Hide Slide Layer when timeline finishes. When you select Hide Other Slide Layers, the learner will not see any other layers you have programmed into the slide. Even though we use the term base layer, this checkbox will not hide the base layer. If you are wanting to hide items and objects on the base layer, you'll select the second checkbox. These 3 checkboxes are not exclusive. You can select any combination of the 3 checkboxes. The third checkbox will automatically close the layer and return to the base layer or layer that directed the lesson to open this specific layer. You want to be careful and judicious about automatically closing a layer. You want to ensure the learner has the ability to absorb all of the information you included on the layer. Automatically closing the layer may prevent the learner from accomplishing this. The first drop-down menu gives you the ability to allow seeking, Where seeking means the layer will have its own seek bar and replay. This drop-down menu will allow you to allow or deny the learner to use the seek bar or replay the layer. The next section is the behavior section, where you will be able to designate the layer as a layer or as a dialogue. If you select layer, then you are giving the learner the ability to interact with the layer's object. But if you designate it as a dialogue, then everything surrounding the material dims, and the learner will not have the ability to interact with the material, the label, and description. Drop-down menus then become available. You can then select a specific object on the slide and add an alt text label and audio description for the item. The next two checkboxes will give the learner the ability to select items on other layers that may appear while this specific layer is showing, and to pause the slide's timeline that is associated with the base layer. The Revisits drop-down menu works exactly like it does on the Slide Properties window. Are you letting the lesson decide the status of the layer and what the learner will see? Or do you want it to return to the look when the learner first saw the layer, or when he or she left the layer?